What just hit Alabama?
Okay, so I know I'm not going crazy, but look at that. What in the world? Dude.
This is huge. This is a massive story. Record this, download this. This is a potentially dangerous story for me to share, but you need to see this because we need answers. I am happy, healthy, and not prone to accidents, just saying. For context, I do a radar and satellite review show on my website every single day. So when I tell you this is freaking weird, I know what frickin' weird is. As I was reviewing radar data, I spotted an anomaly in Florida. It appears that a wave was emanating from each tower, which was subsequently pushing the cloud cover in precipitation outward. That alone shouldn't happen. The mainstream narrative is that these towers only track systems, but here we have clouds and rain being moved in a perfect circular outward fashion at the exact same speeds near each tower. And look at this area. When the clouds collide in the middle between two separate waves from two separate towers. Then as I looked along the Gulf coastline, this is where things got even more crazy. All the towers along the coastline are doing the exact same thing at the exact same times. Texas, Louisiana. I mean, look at Louisiana. The wave is emanating outward to the point where the clouds and precipitation spreads out equally in all directions and is then eliminated. In fact, even more strange is at every area of precipitation near the towers along the Gulf and Atlantic coastline disappears simultaneously. And that's not even the craziest freaking part. The craziest freaking part is the time code for when these waves occurred, about 1940 UTC. These areas felt seismic activity. The local news reported it as an earthquake at a 3.1 magnitude.
Well, at about 2:41 this afternoon, apparently there was an earthquake out about 10 miles deep in the Gulf, 70 miles south of Gulf Shores.
A rare event in this area. You heard me right. The moment we saw these waves around these towers, they reported that there was an earthquake. Here's the thing though. Earthquakes don't impact the atmosphere. It can't move clouds. It certainly wouldn't move clouds in perfect circular waves emitting outward from each and every tower along the entire Gulf coastline up to the Carolinas on the Atlantic coast. And I'm still trying to figure out, is this emanating from the towers themselves? Or is there something working with them in the ocean? So I looked a little further to see what I could find in the cloud cover in the Gulf around the time of the supposed earthquake. And I found this. What is moving these clouds out there like that? What are you guys doing?
No warning. Had a weather alert warning about 3 minutes after we've been on the ground.
What I'm about to show you is probably the craziest thing I've ever seen on the internet. Take a look. Okay, so we've all heard about this company, right? Sure that it does ring a bell. Good. So, Google Translate, Latin to English, nothing crazy. Now let's put a few spaces in between those letters and see what happens. Alright, nothing too crazy so far. And I'll check this out. You cannot make this up. Just try it out. Try it yourself. You'll see. And let me know what you think.
So how is it possible that 50 birds could fall out of the sky at the same time? You heard what I just said? In Mobile, Alabama, 50 birds fell out the sky at the same time after everybody heard a loud boom. Matter of fact, look at this. Look at this.
So what we have here is
June the 14th of
They fell out the
2025.
sky and they died.
Earlier today, around about 1 p.m. It was like this huge lightning that
Look at this.
and over 50 birds fell out the sky. They all in people's yards. They on top of the houses.
If that's not a sign of the times, I don't know what is. So you're telling me that randomly 50 birds just fall out of the sky, end up on people's lawns, gone, unallowed, and nobody knows how that happened? That's some unexplainable. And as random as it seems, it's not that random at all. Look at the times we're in right now. Look at the things that's going on right now, and you tell me how random that is. But what I need you to do is, if you're in Mobile, Alabama, I need you to let me know what happened out there. And another thing I need you to let me know is that common?
Let's look at the original name of Washington, D.C. Back before it was known as Washington, D.C., this land on 7 hills had a name. What was that name? Rome. No kidding. You can look this up. Rome, Maryland. And this is probably old news for some of you. I did not know this until the other day. I was just aware of the Rome connection because of the symbols that they have. I'd never really looked much further into it than that. But DC was known as Rome, Maryland. And the guy, listen to this, this is going to blow your mind. The guy who owned it, the guy who owned the land, the plot of land where the Capitol building was, his name was Francis Pope. And I was on a Catholic website looking up some information as I was digging through all this, and they said, yes, this guy's name was Francis Pope, and his nickname was Pope of Rome on the Tiber, because there was a little creek that went through there that they had named the Tiber. And if you don't know, the Tiber River is in Rome, and we have a pope called Pope Francis in the year 2021. You cannot make this up. I thought this was something I could just fact check and be like, this is wrong. I'm going to fact check it. It's wrong, like Facebook fact checkers. But no, there is a guy, or was a guy, named Francis Pope on the property records, and the place was called Rome.
So an archaeologist found a 2,000-year-old shoe in a ditch, and when he pulled it out, it was so big that the audience around him gasped audibly. For context, the shoe was about as big as someone's hand and forearm combined, which to me seems like it definitely belonged to a giant who lived back in the day. And while the people around him were surprised to see something like that, ancient texts and manuscripts from earlier human civilizations have been telling us that giants not only existed, but were actually quite common in those days. In the near future, as we grow technologically, I wouldn't be surprised if we discover even more items that will make us rethink what our history was like altogether. For example, archaeologists have also recently discovered a lost continent that sank into the ocean. It had a creature on it that was apparently 13 foot and is now extinct. Maybe one day we'll discover and learn so much about our history that it'll be common knowledge that giants, dragons, and even sirens existed in the distant past.
Allowed to go into the Vatican to see all the frozen, cryogenically frozen popes, because one of them was my name, Consalvi. My father's name is a Roman name called.
Did you go in?
Yeah, and that I got because it was on my passport. Consalvi.
So you saw the frozen popes?
I saw all the frozen popes.
Was it wild?
Terry Bozzio came with me, and Terry says, "Can we take a Polaroid?" I'm like, Terry, you're serious, right? We went in with scarves on. Terry's like, get the scarf up over his nose. It pumps like this. And all these popes are above your head, like eye level, up in these clear caskets, dressed to the nines in their pupa. And they're all.
Did you see your ancestor?
Yeah, and I stood right next to him. And so we leave we see and we do all this stuff, paperwork, sign to get in, get out, and all this stuff. Yeah. And then Consalvi, the Pope's all over the Vatican. He's in the walls, the whole 9 yards, right? So we go back to Frank's, the hotel, and Frank's Zappa says to Terry, well, does she look like the Pope? Terry goes, she looks exactly like him. looked exactly like them. They stood standing next to each other. I couldn't believe it.
Now, what's very important is the pentagram is an important symbol to Freemasonry. In fact, the Eastern Star, the Winds group, their symbol is a pentagram. But many people don't know the difference between a star and a pentagram. But the Masons themselves know the difference, and they tell us what the difference is. In the book called The History of Freemasonry, it's written in 1891. This book was written by a series of 32nd and 33rd degree Freemasons. On page 49 of the book, it says this, quote, "This star represents good when represented with 1 point upward." And the page reads on, let me remind you, these are high-ranking Masons, quote, "But when turned with 1 point down, it represents evil. All that is opposed to the good, pure, and virtuous," end quote. So the star with 1 point down is evil. And the Masons have it on the cover of this Bible. Eastern Star is a pentagram, as I mentioned, as its chief emblem. And it's always been, the pentagram is one of the biggest symbols in Satanism, and probably the biggest. And as you can see right here, this is a clothing line right here. It's called the New World Order clothing line. By the way, they also had, as you can see here, first of all, it has a pentagram on the guy's side there. What's interesting is their advertisement, they talk about order coming out of chaos for the New World Order clothing line.
All of the amazing things that the Army has done, whether it's helping with floods in North Carolina or wildfires in California, or we talked to an astronaut yesterday who's on the moon, who's a soldier. Including actually going to war and fighting to defend the freedoms that are that make our nation so great.
I've often said, I have not seen a new graveyard in my lifetime. I've never heard about a graveyard being too full to accept new bodies, too. So you would think that there would have to be a lot of them that would say, nope, no vacancy here. So what would you have to do? You would have to take out new plots of land in order to continue to bury people. But they don't do that. So where are the bodies?
We've all seen the viral video of the guy that's a part-time gravedigger that says you'll never see a new cemetery being built, and everybody saying that that's proof of the Matrix. Well, buckle up, let's go for a ride, because I did the math after it piqued my curiosity. So we'll start with some raw numbers, and for everything I have here, I only used Google's quick search results to keep it even and fair. So, our current population is 340 million today. At our current death rate, that's 7.7% dies every year, for a total of 26,180,000. Well, currently, we've plummeted in the last 25 years to 39.4% buried. That's 10,314,920 a year. So keep that in mind, but let's go back further because cemeteries are never new, they're always old, right? The most you can fit is 1,250 people in an acre. The American Planning Association says there's currently 140,000 acres. So let's go back even further. So from 1800 to 1900, 80 million Americans died. And from 1900 to 2000, 270 million Americans died. That's a total of 355 million people dead. Well, depending on which schematic you want to use, it was anywhere from 83 to 92% were buried opposed to other methods. I kept it at 80% just to, be heavily conservative and see where this goes. Well, it gets a lot more interesting now because at 80%, that's 284 million graves. At 140,000 acres, it's at best 170 million graves. So we already got 109 million people just chilling out, like stacked up dead somewhere, waiting to get buried or are buried and still have to bury new people every day.
Math does not math.
It is unusual. It is unusual.
I think that what a lot of people have said, I believe this to be true, is that if you look into the world population numbers, a lot of people believe that the books are cooked. There's not as many people as they say there are.
Who was the last president to control the CIA?
No one had actual control over the CIA.
Ever. ever, because most of the time, with one pertinent, horrible example, presidents have gone along with the CIA. Of course, the one horrible, shocking, disgusting example is John F. Kennedy, who famously said that he would like to take the CIA and tear it into 1,000 pieces. And maybe those were his last words, in essence.
So apparently this building was made at the same time as the gold rush in Montana, but take a look at this right here. You can't tell me that's not a fingerprint. Look at the detail, the small little details. That would be a very big thumbprint. The Nephilim, the Giants. What do you think?
Now then, here we go.
The amazing occurrence captured on our trail cam was this. Multiple orb-like light phenomena pouring out of the ground or the pyramid.
Out of the ground.
It would be very difficult to explain these orbs as backscattered dust particles, particularly since there was no movement of the grass in the foreground. Were they alien life forms?
And the thing is, there's no wind out there either. This is mad. I'm telling you now, this is absolutely mad. It is like a miracle.